So last night Artifact got a patch and it was kind of a big deal, and as such I want to talk about it. Now, I want to talk about what was in the patch as well as what it means for the game's future. So, we've got the news up on the screen, and you can see this when you log into the game, and they're calling this patch the Build Your Legend update. All of their patches slash updates have had like little names to them, which I think is adorable. But this thing introduced, first and foremost, skill rating and account leveling. So in the past, people have said, hey, I feel like I don't have anything to play for. I like a progression system. I'd like a ladder. And these are essentially Valve's attempt at giving you that. Now, this is just the first iteration. It's possible this will undergo some changes, but I do think that it is important to note that this is not a direct ladder, and I like this approach. This isn't going to be reflective of essentially your games across all matchmaking modes, if you will, right? So whether you just queue randomly or you're in the events that potentially earn you prizes, things like that, whatever the case may be, you're going to have your games count toward your skill rating. Your skill rating will only ever go up, never down. So once you've earned a skill rating, it won't go down. They're going to range somewhere between like 1 and 75, I believe. So you'll start at 1, you play some games, and then it'll go up. Your skill rating is going to be seasonal. Now, they have not announced how long the seasons will be, when their start and end dates will be. It just says that there's going to be a season starting soon, and that when the seasons are over, they will refresh, essentially. You'll go back down to 1. It is also going to be separate for constructed and draft, so you'll have a different skill rating in each of the different formats. Now, account leveling is separate. Account leveling is what it sounds like. Your account has a level, and as your account goes up in level, you will unlock rewards. Those could be things in the game like tickets or packs, but it can also be like icons, potentially cosmetics in the future. I'm actually going to go ahead and close the news and just kind of open this up. So right now, I just got this ghostly, barren, empty account icon because I haven't played any games since the update. I was sleeping last night, actually, when it dropped, and then I had work today. So anyway, when I hit level 2, I get a card pack and an event ticket. And you can see that you get these as you go. And you'll also see that you get some icons that open up to you as your account levels up. And right now, we've got stuff all the way up through an account level of 200. After 16, the event tickets and packs appear to dry up, but it is worth noting that this is just what's in place right now, right? At some point, they might expand this beyond account level 200. At some point, they might add more in, right? We could get a future update where, maybe they add something at account level 60 and we get a new tier. Who knows? This is new, but the point that I want to stress here is that we do have at least some sort of progression system, both for your account and seasonally now, and Valve is listening. They're being quick with turning out features for the game, which is very, very refreshing, very, very fantastic if you're a fan of the game. You'll also notice there's this weekly bonus thing. Win 3 games in a week and you get bonus XP. Timer starts after your first win. That's neat, right? Gives you an incentive to keep coming back week after week. And the other thing that I kind of wanted to note as well is that it's not shown here, and it's actually not even shown here in this news thing, but if you go to the update page or click on this link as well, you get a little bit more info, at least about the progression system, and there are other ways you can get bonus XP. I guess there are things that will trigger when you play a game. Some of the examples when you go to that page that are listed are like win a game where one of your towers is at 1 health, win a game where you don't lose any heroes, things like that. And there's a whole number of them, and you can get up to as many as 3 each game. So you do have opportunities for bonus XP as you play, which I think is pretty neat. But yeah, skill rating in the game now, account leveling in the game now. I have heard reports from some people that have said they've won a handful of games and they didn't see their skill rating go up. So I don't know exactly what your win rate needs to be or how many wins you need to have for your skill rating to increase. It's also entirely possible that this won't increase until the season begins. And as I said, they have not announced seasonal dates yet as far as like when things start, when things end, and when the refreshes occur. So keep an eye out for future news or info or details regarding that. Big deal in my opinion, again, that they turned this around as fast as they did. Now, card balance. So this is news for a number of reasons. In the closed beta, because it was closed, there were some cards that underwent some changes. Some things moved around a bit. I don't want to talk too much about that just because I don't know what's still covered by the NDA. But let's just say we had balance changes, but we were all operating under the assumption that when the game launched, we would see few, if any, balance changes at all. This is because Valve had said, just kind of directly in the past, that they didn't see a reason to change cards, and they were also worried about the open market or the game's economy. They were afraid that people would not like changes because they have invested in cards. Now, they've got a lot of feedback about that since, right? One of the benefits of digital card games is that they do let you modify things. And one of the other nice things about games is that if they're well balanced, then you're more likely to attract players. And if they're not balanced very well, then you have to wait for the next content update for people to kind of come back to your game. And that's not really nice for the player base either, right? Because then you'll have these periods where it's like, okay, an expansion came out or a set came out and I'm not happy with the game, so now I have to wait 3 months for the next expansion or whatever it is before I come back to a game that I potentially enjoy. So they have basically said, Valve, that they agree with a lot of these assessments. In fact, here on the screen we can see where it says, in the end, we struggled to see the benefits of immutability outweighing the numerous downsides. The average player mainly wants the game quality to be high above all other considerations. And again, this is something that I can get behind. I understand the market standpoint, but like I didn't start playing Artifact because I wanted to play Stock Market Simulator 2.0. To be honest, I don't even give the market too much of a second thought. I list my extras every now and then. If I want to buy a card, then I buy a card, but I am not watching it like a hawk. I kind of don't care how much stuff shifts around. What matters to me is that the game is enjoyable to play and that it is easily accessible for new players. I do think that balance changes will also help with that because, quite frankly, if the market's more volatile and people's stocks, if you will, are more liquid, then it's going to be more likely that new players will buy in at reasonable prices. So overall, I like that they have changed their stance. But they didn't just say, hey, like, we're open to balance changes now, despite the fact that we have said we were not going to be doing that in the past. They also changed some cards. They came at it hard, right? So we have card changes. Starting with Axe. Axe had his base stats changed from 7 to 11 to 6 to 10. This is a pretty big deal. 7 health used to be a big metric for a lot of heroes and essentially determining whether a hero was good or not. Heroes that had more than 7 health were strongly played and sought after because of exactly Axe. Axe is popular enough that you should expect to run into Axe, and if your hero gets one shot by Axe, that's a bad thing unless they have an amazing ability. Like Drow still sees play, right? Because she has an amazing ability and an amazing signature card, but was oftentimes not a flop hero, meaning played in the first round because you fear Axe and you want to deploy her away from him. So 7 to 6 is a big deal. It also is in many ways kind of a nerf to Berserker's Call, because that's going to become slightly less effective and will have some effects on cards like Duel as well. So not that we didn't expect this. Axe was popular enough that you should expect some sort of an adjustment. He was like tiers above most other heroes. But yeah, they addressed Axe right out of the gate. Now, this next line is interesting because normally if you play digital card games, you typically expect a long list of nerfs. However, Valve has buffed almost as many cards as they've nerfed, if not more, as you'll see as we go through this. So Bloodseeker is getting buffed. Bloodseeker goes from a 7/6 to a 7/7 and had his signature card reduced in cost by 1 from 5 to 4. I'm a big fan of this, mostly because this now makes Bloodseeker not necessarily always worse than Debbie. Having any of your heroes be strictly worse than a basic hero, I think, is just ultimately bad for the game, and certainly bad for draft. It feels like a wasted pick, a wasted slot in many cases, and at this point, I could see an argument made for running Bloodseeker over Debbie, especially when you factor in things like the changes to Axe, because Axe now has 6 attack, Bloodseeker goes up to 7 health, and no longer immediately dies if he runs into an Axe or a Keef or something like that, and so suddenly Bloodseeker doesn't seem half bad. So I like this change. Do I think Bloodseeker is going to run rampant in the constructed meta all of a sudden? No, not necessarily, but I don't hate Bloodseeker now, and that's huge. So next up we have Cheating Death, and I always kind of deep down thought this card would eventually be changed because the gameplay experience, I think, was unfun for both players involved. But I'm surprised it happened so fast. Like, I'm actually kind of shocked. So, mana cost changed from 5 to 4. Old text, as we all know, allies had a 50% chance of surviving with 1 health when they would die if there was a green hero present. New text is you activate it, and it has a 1-turn cooldown, and you give a unit Death Shield this round, but can only be used if there's a allied green hero in this lane. This is really interesting for a number of reasons. Like, I don't even know where to begin. Let's start with the obvious. Cheating Death was mostly played in the past as a deterrent for Annihilation. It makes Annihilation really risky if you suspect that if they've got 5 units in a lane and you might only kill 1 of them or none of them or whatever, then you're less likely to play Annihilation unless it's an absolute, like, must need to play situation, right? This was a deterrent. Now, with the new Cheating Death, Annihilation is still potentially deterred, but there's a lot of ways that the dynamic changes, because old Cheating Death, you didn't know what was going to happen until you played the card. With this one, the Death Shield is up front, so you do know what's going to happen if you play Annihilation and which units will die and which units will not. But it also means you can play around it significantly better, even more so in the later stages of the game, where if you can find a way to essentially kill a unit twice, right, or at least get them low enough where they would die and pop that Death Shield, then the Annihilation will go off. I do like that they changed the cost. By moving this from 5 to 4, you, in theory, in a lane where you're snowballing and winning, you have a chance to protect as many as 3 units with this, right? You could protect a unit the turn you play it, protect a unit the following turn, and then if you have initiative, protect a 3rd unit before they annihilate. Now, this is interesting because it is also the sort of thing that is a proactive play, in that you can protect units that aren't in danger of dying right away, or you could also protect units that are about to die in combat. It's just going to be different. I'm curious to see exactly whether or not Cheating Death falls off the face of the map, or if people start using it more strategically. And I do like that that is the consideration. I like that it is no longer just a dice roll, a coin flip, a gamble. You can still use Cheating Death, you just have to use it strategically. And it's going to be interesting to see how this works out. Now, next up is Drow Ranger. Again, not really a shock that Drow is getting addressed because Drow and Axe were kind of the big two, if you will, in terms of heroes. So Drow was addressed in the form of her signature spell. Gus used to silence all enemy heroes this round. Very, very powerful. Enabled a lot of combo decks. If you've played Artifact at all, followed the constructed meta, you know the drill. New Gust is essentially similar to her effect in Dota is my understanding. It is more like a cone. So now you silence an enemy hero and its allied neighbors. This is a big deal because it no longer just silences everything. Now, it still has the potential to be very, very powerful. Silence is a powerful effect, and the fact that you silence an enemy hero and its allied neighbors means you could still hit multiples. But now position matters. So specifically, if you're playing like the blue-green deck that tries to combo with Incarnation of Salamene and it goes wide, because your board is wider, you're less likely to have your enemy heroes grouped up together. Because when they get deployed and they're assigned a position randomly, if your board is wide, then they're more likely to be spread out, and so it'll be harder to hit them if they're all grouped up. Meanwhile, in smaller, more grouped up lanes, you're more likely to silence more than one target. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic now with this. It's still a good card, but it's not like bonkers the way that it used to be. Now, Drow also kind of got addressed in another way, which is the buff of another card. So right now, like I said, we've seen 3 nerfs, 1 buff. Let's go down to buff number 2. And this is a pretty big buff. In fact, this is almost insane when you think about it. Jasper Daggers. Gold cost changed from 7 to 5, so it is significantly cheaper. The old text was equipped hero has +2 attack and pierce. The new text, I can't even believe that they did this, right? Equipped hero has +2 attack and pierce. So it still does what it used to do, and it got cheaper. But it doesn't stop there. Equip effect. Purge your opponent's effects from equipped hero. That is huge. That is so, like, game-alteringly good in so many ways. So if you purge your opponent's effects from equipped hero, this means silence, right? So whether it's old Drow, new Drow, whatever, if your hero gets silenced and then you have this in your hand, you can play it and it unsilences your hero, and then you can still play cards. That's a big deal. Similarly, this will remove stun. So Tidehunter, Earthshaker, some of those effects are going to have counterplay now, right? Just the existence of this card alone means that your opponent can no longer, like, stun or silence or whatever your side of the board and then just go off and do whatever they want and play solitaire. I mean, they can still do that, but this assumes that if you have this card, they have to at least consider that you can interrupt them. Just, again, like, this card is, at least for the foreseeable future, going to be like a must-play in 90% of decks, if not all of them. Because just seeing this on an opponent's deck list, right? Anytime they spend gold, specifically 5 gold, you just have to assume, like, okay, maybe my opponent bought this. I now have to play around it if I was looking to combo off, right? This change, affects combo decks pretty significantly. I think it's good for the game. I think that it is a great effect, but holy cow, man! Like this went from like a never play to a must play overnight. This is a big buff. Hey, speaking of buffs, Lions got buffed. Not a big buff, but it is a buff. So his ability, Finger of Death, used to just deal 8 piercing damage to a unit. It now still does 8 piercing damage to a unit, but it also says Quicken. Quicken is a new cooldown, or keyword. Oof. Quicken is a new keyword that reduces the cooldown by 1, but not below 1. So essentially, you have to wait a long time to activate his ability the first time, but then after you've used it, it has a shorter cooldown every time thereafter. Now, this is important because it's the first time we've seen this keyword Quicken, but if you see a keyword in any card game, you naturally assume that you will eventually see more of it, right? There were very few purge effects before, and I've been long saying that we will see more in the future, and we now see it in Jasper Daggers, and I still think we'll see even more purge effects in the future. But now we see Quicken, so we have to assume we'll see it again in the future, whether that's on other heroes, whether that's on future items. Maybe maybe we'll see items that say like equip effect quicken 3 or something, right? So that you can buy an item, and if somebody has a long cooldown, like a Tidehunter, like a Lion, you can buy with gold early the item, slap it on them, and get to use their ability early on, right? Again, just the existence of Quicken is kind of neat, and I like it. So yeah, that's a great change. Outworld Devourer gets a buff. That's right, we're up to more buffs than nerfs now. Simple base stats change, but kind of a big deal. Base stats go from 4.6 to 4.7. Again, 7 health is a very important number because of the change to Axe. 7 health is also a very important number for Outworld Devourer for another reason. That's that it's going to now survive at any cost. So if Outworld Devourer is at full health and you play at any cost, it no longer nukes itself along with the rest of the lane. It has the potential to survive, and that's a big deal for blue, because if you're playing any sort of blue control, and I'll talk about that in a minute, at any cost is a tool you want to use. So this is a pretty big change. I don't think you're going to see Outworld Devourer suddenly be a monster and constructed by any means, but again, much like the Bloodseeker change, this could be enough to maybe make it not be terrible in draft. Specifically because the signature card isn't terrible. The 4 attack is relevant on a blue hero because it means it trades into melee creeps, and not a lot of blue heroes do that. And now that the 7 health makes it a little bit stronger, it's not necessarily always worse than Jemai. Lastly, we have Timbersaw. Timbersaw is getting buffed as well. So yes, that is going to be the end of it. We have more buffs than nerfs, which is amazing. Timbersaw is seeing his passive changed. Before it was you had +1 armor for each of his attackers. Now it is Timbersaw has +1 armor for each of its attackers, and each of Timbersaw's attackers have -1 armor. So if you're attacking Timbersaw now, he is sturdier and you are weaker. So great, you know, overall buff for Timbersaw. I actually would still play Timbersaw pretty consistently in draft. If I was playing red, I think Timbersaw was better than Keef, but I will certainly play him more often now. I think that's kind of a big deal. But yeah, so that wraps it up in terms of the actual balance changes. And I like that there was a lot of buffs. I like that they reverted their stance on it. I love the progression stuff they added. The last thing I want to talk about is what do these balance changes mean for kind of the overall constructed meta, and I've touched on it a little bit here. I think Axe is still good enough to see a lot of play because Berserker's Call is still really good, and honestly a 6-2-10 is still good enough in most of those decks that wanted to run it. That being said, if you see red decks that don't run Axe, I wouldn't be shocked either. If you wanted to do a 3 of something and a 2 of red, and you opted for like Legion Commander and Bristleback, or Legion Commander and you know, maybe my boy Beast, for example, I mean, I don't know if it's correct, but I wouldn't necessarily like think you were as crazy as I would have in the past. 6-2-10 is still really good. Berserker's Call is still really good, so I expect Axe to see play. Cheating Death, I think, is going to take some getting used to. I don't necessarily hate new Cheating Death. I like that I can be strategic with it, and I like that I can be proactive with it, but it is not going to be as good in response to Annihilation as the old one, and that's a big deal. I think combo decks are going to potentially see a decline in play a little bit as people, like right now, as I film this, they're probably still pretty popular, but I think as people figure out that Drow's signature and the addition of new Jasper Daggers is actually going to make it far easier to interrupt the big combos, and that's a big deal because being able to respond like halfway through a combo or even after a combo is important, right? Like if you let somebody waste all their cards and resources on what they think is a complete combo, and then at the end of their combo, after they've played everything, you Jasper Daggers your blue hero and then play Annihilation when they thought that they had gotten away with it scot-free, that's gonna be a big deal. And that brings me to the last part of this, which is, you'll notice Annihilation was not touched here. At any cost was not touched here. In fact, blue, which was already a pretty strong color to begin with, was not touched here. So, the immediate winner is blue. Annihilation is a big deal, at any cost is a big deal. A lot of other of the blue control effects are a big deal, and I'm not saying that blue is gonna like magically dominate the meta. I think that you can still compete with it, but right now the immediate like knee-jerk winner is definitely blue. It'll be interesting to see how things shake out, you know, a couple of weeks or a month from these balance changes, or it'll also be interesting to see whether or not they make very, very frequent balance changes. We're kind of in new territory here. It is worth noting that up until this patch, we didn't think Valve was going to make balance changes at all, and now they did. So we have no idea what to expect in terms of a cadence. This could be once a season, this could be once a month, this could be like once every 2 weeks. We have no idea. We are in the wild west of balance changes right now, so I would say, you know, keep an eye on blue, keep an eye on decks that target blue to counter it, because those two things will be very, very popular and constructed in the immediate future. And keep an eye out for future patches from Valve, because the speed at which they're knocking these things out has been amazing. And now that they are showing that they're willing to make balance changes and do so without notice, yeah, it's gonna be a fun ride here in the immediate future. So anyway, that's my recap, if you will, my review, if you will, of the patch. I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you like the changes? Do you like the progression system? Do you like the balance changes? How do you think things will look, you know, a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? Because right now, even if I don't necessarily like 100% of what's been going on, I like that Valve is being as active as they are. I think that's a great sign for us as players and members of the community. So I want to hear from you. If you made it this far, listen to all of my rambling, you are a saint. Thank you, and I will catch you next time.